I'm looking at these different dates for things, and basically all the writings starting from what they think is the first thing written, Christian writing written. Some say it's Thessalonians, some say Galatians, all the way to early 3rd century works. And I don't know, maybe other people feel this way. I'm not satisfied with the dates that are given in study Bibles, you know, that have everything written. And I don't know why they do this. They have things written at incredibly early times for things that we know are possibly late, and then for things that they don't want to have an early date to, like the Epistles of John and the Apocalypse of John. They put that at 90. They think they can get away with putting that at 90. The extreme early dates are biased in some ways, and some dates are fixed. We pretty much know exactly when you know, sometimes it's a year, and sometimes it's a 10-year period where it had to have been written. But there's an extreme there's a bias to have early dates, and that's pretty extreme. And then there's a bias to put it at a very late date. You find people like John Dominic Crossan, or people who the Moratorian fragment doesn't fit their concept of how Scripture develops, so it's got to be something like from the 4th century. No, it's mid-2nd century. Looking at dates for things, they'll have, and this is going from early Christian writings. This is and it stretches things to the latest date they possibly can, and then even into absurdity. Gospel of Mark, 65 to 80. To 80. Even though it couldn't have possibly been written after AD 70. That's why I put it at AD 69. And they put the Gospel of Thomas. This is the Sayings Gospel, not the Infancy Gospel. The Sayings Gospel of Thomas, they put from 50 to 140. That's kind of funny because they put the Gospel of Luke 80 to 130, and oh my god, they put Matthew before Luke. Yep, 80 to 100. Now you might be asking yourself, well, why is there such a wide date on the Gospel of Thomas? Well, because they have to put it that way. Sayings Gospel of Thomas was probably written around 150 AD. AD 150. But some people want it to be early, so they have to include the early date, because it's a range. Some scholars say this, some say this. They want it to be early, even though some of the most people call, I don't like this word, liberal, basically meaning bashing the church and trying to say everything's, you know, everything's a later date, and nobody actually wrote what they wrote except for Paul and a few things that other people wrote. Like Carson and all, John Dominic Carson and all those people say, we can see that it's got, not only is it Q, it's not all of Q, and it's got the changes from Mark to Matthew and Luke, and in their more finalized forms. Not to mention, that if somebody were writing down what Jesus said, and it looks nothing like Mark, which is a passion narrative with a bunch of with a long introduction, which they have the passion narrative being from 30 to 60, which that's Mark. That's a third of Mark. I mean, if anybody can't tell that Mark is super primitive, that's why people read Mark and they're like, where are the teachings of Jesus? It's already presupposing you know a lot of this stuff, the teachings, but that you're probably not living in Palestine. It's very strange. So it doesn't make sense that somebody's writing the words of the living Jesus, because did he have scribes following him? But it would make sense that somebody wrote that after, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were well established, and they didn't like that view. They wanted an anti-woman, anti-sex, docetic view. So it seems to be about the time that these characters start to rise up of people like Marcion. At least they're not as crazy as some people in training did things like the Gospel of Peter. The Gospel of John, they put 90 to 120. 90 to 120? We have a fragment of the Gospel of John from 115. Did John have a time machine? And then they have these things, the oxyrachnus, I can't pronounce it, 1224 Gospel, basically a fragment. And then the whatever the hell it's called, 840 Gospel. And you hear them talking, and you see the comments and of the scholars, not comments on like a board, but just what the scholars have commented on. And when you read these things, they don't look, there's nothing in them that's docetic. There's nothing in them that sounds, it sounds like any of the 4 canonical Gospels. And it deals with the same subject matter. Lending credence that the early scraps and stuff that we find, just haphazardly, fall on siding with the canonical Gospels being more correct. And so does everything else, but things like take for example, I don't want to use an Acts, things like the Sophia of Jesus. Oh, when do they put that? Sophia writing. Yeah, Gospel of Peter 70 to 160. I don't understand that. Secret Mark, they even believe secret Mark. Like they even, why not just put the Gospel of Barnabas in here? We know it's from the Middle Ages. The infancy Gospel of James. This is strange. I would have put that at 250 before when reading it. But the infancy Gospel of James, again, 140 to 170. Why, you think you have the original autograph of it? I mean, that's the earliest thing that we found that's talking about Mary, of actual archaeological, of in the dating record, not in when it was written, but actually the scrap one, what it comes from, of like when we dig it out of the ground. And that's from what, 150 about? Marcion 130 to 140. Alright. Valentinus, Basilides, Marcion. I think a lot of the confusion grows up because we have we have these very early stuff, and that people don't want it to be early. I mean, even, well, it's just people don't want it to be early, and because you'll have something like the Gospel of Mark, the Gospel of Luke, the Epistles of Paul, which you can see are very early, and then you have things like 1st and 2nd Peter, where these are pseudonymous, and 2nd Peter is probably the latest thing written. It's probably the last piece of writing written that got into the New Testament, and Jude is very weird and late. And then you have something like John. Where does that fall? It sounds very educated, so we're going to put that very late as well. And then since the Apocalypse of John, we're going to say that was written by the writer of the Epistles of John, we're going to put that even later. And then the Gospel of John was written by the people who wrote the Epistles of John, we're going to put that later. No, it's not. That's ridiculous, because there's only, again, just like Mark had to be written before AD 70. The Apocalypse of John, and I mean Mark in its current form, not the variant at the end, but I mean of shifting anything around. Passionary is much older, but the Apocalypse of John, I think that's one of the first things written, well, after Paul, but it's crazy early. But people just don't, I mean, the Christians, the Protestant evangelicals don't like to put an early date on that, and neither do the